The cadets looked from the dent in the wall to the wounded warrior, to the human still holding nothing but shoelaces. Their minds raced their belief in their own superiority. Cracked, some whispered. It was chance, others hissed. It was impossible, but none could deny the truth. The weapon worked. The human had built it with nothing and made it strike with deadly force. The instructor turned his gaze on the cadets, his tail lashing against the floor. You laugh at humans because they are small, because they look weak. But today you see what weakness hides imagination. His words cut into the silence, each syllable heavy. Never forget this. He continued, humans are dangerous, not because of strength, but because they will always find a way to fight. The human remained silent, his sling dangling at his side, but his stillness was louder than words. The cadets watched him now, not with mockery, but with unease, some even with fear. The injured warrior limped back to his row. His pride shattered his armor. Still shining, but his spirit dented more than the wall had been. The instructor gestured toward the human again, his eyes glowing with sharp light. This was not luck. This was not trick. This was survival. And survival is what makes humans terrifying. Cadets shifted uncomfortably, their claws tapping against armor. Some tried to look brave. Others avoided the human's eyes. None could erase the image of the dent in steel, or the warrior falling under a shard of scrap. The human finally spoke, his voice soft but clear. Survival is not about strength. It is about using what you have. The hall grew even quieter. The cadets stared at him, their minds replaying every motion, every knot, every pull of string. He had made something out of nothing, and it had worked. The instructor studied the human for a long moment, his sharp face unreadable. Then he spoke again. You have proven your weapon, but tomorrow you will prove your mind. The cadets whispered uneasily. What did he mean? Another challenge. Another. Test what else could the human create? The human only nodded once, his calm face unshaken, his shoelace sling wrapped carefully around his hand. The cadets knew. Then this was only the beginning, and it was a beginning. They did not understand, but could not forget. The hall ended in silence, but that silence was heavier than any roar. The aliens filed out their whispers, echoing down the steel corridors, every word circling the same truth. Humans were not weak. They were dangerous, because even with nothing they found a way to strike. And the story was far from over. The training hall felt colder than before. Though the lights burned bright and steady, the atmosphere was heavy. Every cadet's eyes flicked again and again toward the human. The shoelace, weapon still in his hand, the dent in the wall still shining under the lamps, the memory of the alien warrior's cry still ringing in their ears. No one laughed anymore. No one dared. The instructor paced slowly across the steel floor, his claws scraping. With every step, his tail dragged behind him, leaving faint lines on the ground. He stopped in the center, his voice cutting through the silence like a blade. The weapon is built. The weapon is tested. But now we see if it can be trusted. The cadets shifted, nervously glancing at one another. Trust a human's toy with their lives impossible, but they dared not speak. The human stood still, calm, as if carved from stone, his shoelace sling dangling at his side, his eyes fixed forward, waiting. The instructor turned sharply toward one cadet, a tall one with sharp horns and green scales. His voice rose, "Cadet, Zarak, step forward, you will stand." As the target, Zarak's eyes widened. His throat tightened, but he obeyed. His heavy boots echoed across the floor. As he took position a short distance from the human, his armor was thick, his confidence forced. He tried to sneer, though the corners of his mouth trembled. "I am not afraid," he hissed. "The human string cannot harm me." The instructor tilted his head. "Prove it." The cadets whispered the sound, like insects crawling in the silence, their eyes darting from Zarak to the human to the instructor. None of them sure what would happen next. The human crouched slowly, his movements measured, his fingers brushed. The ground searching, he found another piece of metal, smaller than before, jagged and uneven. He held it up between his fingers, his face expressionless. The cadets leaned forward, their eyes wide, their hearts racing. He placed the shard into the sling. His hands pulled back the strings, arms straight, his body tense, every muscle focused. Zarak raised his shield, high, covering his chest. His horns gleamed under the lights, his voice sharp and mocking. "Your toy will break on my shield." But his voice shook. His hands tightened too hard against the grip of his weapon. Sweat glistened under his scales, though the hall was cold. The human said nothing. His eyes fixed on the point between Zarak's horns, he breathed once, slow, deep, steady, then released. The shard flew faster than before. A sharp crack filling the air like thunder. It smashed into Zarak's shield. Sparks flashed. The sound rang so loud it echoed against the steel walls. Zarak staggered one step back. His knees buckled. He struggled to hold the shield in place. The cadets gasped. Some shouted, others fell silent. The shard had not pierced the shield, but it had struck with such force that the alien almost dropped it. His arms shook under the weight. His smirk gone, replaced by shock. The human lowered the sling, calm as ever. His eyes locked on Zarak, who now breathed heavy, his chest rising and falling, his pride shattered. The cadets whispered in disbelief. "Impossible. No string can strike with that strength. How does he do it?" "What? Are humans?" The instructor stepped forward again, his face unreadable, his tail lashed against the floor. "Silence," he commanded. The hall obeyed. He turned to Zarak. "Your thoughts." Zarak swallowed his pride. His voice trembled. "It is no toy." His eyes flicked. Toward the human there is power in that string. The cadets shifted uneasily. They had mocked the human, laughed at him, scorned him, but now fear slithered into their hearts. If Shoelaces could bend steel and shake shields, what else could humans make? The instructor raised his claw again, his voice slow but heavy. "This is the lesson you will not forget. Humans are dangerous because they create not from strength, but from nothing." The cadets looked at the human, his small frame, his plain face, his simple uniform. No claws, no horns, no shining armor yet. He stood calm, powerful in his silence, the shoelace sling wrapped tight in his hand. The instructor turned sharply toward the human, his eyes narrowing. "The weapon has struck steel. The weapon has struck. Shield now, it must strike purpose." He pointed toward the far end of the hall, where targets were lined, tall armored plates used for training cadets with rifles. "You will strike those." The cadets muttered, "Targets designed for energy blasts, not scraps." Of metal, from string. This would be the moment to prove if the human's trick was real. The human walked forward slowly, his steps echoing against the steel floor. He stopped a fair distance from the first target. His eyes studied it, calm, his fingers tightened around the sling. He bent down again, searching, found another piece of scrap round, this time smoother. He placed it in the sling, pulled back arms, steady his face, a mask of focus. The cadets leaned forward, their claws tapping against the floor, their eyes unblinking. The human released. The shard cracked through the air, struck the target with a loud clang. Sparks burst across its surface. A dent appeared deep enough to mark the steel. The cadets gasped again. Some stumbled back. The human reloaded another shard, fired again. Another dent appeared beside the first, faster, sharper, cleaner shot after shot. The human fired his shoelace weapon, moving with rhythm, every strike carving dents into steel plates designed to withstand rifles. His arms never trembled, his eyes never wavered. Each shard flew like lightning, sharp and unstoppable. The cadets stood frozen, their fear growing with every sound, every spark, every dent. Each strike told the same truth. Humans could not be measured by claws or armor or technology. They were measured by something else. Imagination. The instructor finally raised his claw again. The human stopped his sling. Lowered, silence fell once more, heavy, unbroken. The instructor's voice filled the hall. "Never. Underestimate what looks weak. Never underestimate what looks simple. He turned his gaze across the rows of cadets today. You see why humans are not prey today. You see why they are feared. The cadets did not cheer. They did not laugh. Their eyes fixed on the human, some wide with shock, some narrowed with fear, but all filled with unease. None of them would forget what they had seen. The human stood still, shoelace, sling in hand, the dented targets behind him, the silence around him heavy like a storm. Waiting to break, he said nothing. He only looked forward, calm as ever, his presence more terrifying than any roar, and as the cadets whispered in the shadows, the story of the shoelace slingshot began to spread. Beyond the hall, whispered from one, two, another, growing louder like fire across dry grass. Humans had shown their strength, not with steel, not with plasma, but with string and imagination, and the galaxy would not forget it. The hall was restless, the air thick with unease. Every cadet, still, saw the dents burned into the armored targets. Their minds replayed the sharp crack of each shot, the sparks that flew with every impact, and the calm silence of the human as he made it all happen. Nothing could erase that image. The human stood still. In the center of the floor, shoelace weapon, hanging loosely at his side, as if he carried nothing at all. Yet the room treated him as if he carried fire itself. The instructor moved slowly across the steel floor, his claws tapping with each step, his sharp eyes never leaving the human. He stopped, his massive frame looming above the cadets, his tail curled behind him, his voice rumbled deep. The weapon has been proven against steel, it has been proven against shield, but now we test it against flesh. A wave of whispers spread through the ranks, cadets shifting uneasily. This was different. Steel did not bleed. Shields did not cry out. Flesh could be wounded or killed. The risk was greater. Fear stirred under their scales. The instructor's eyes scanned the rows and landed on another cadet, smaller but quick. His armor dented from training, his eyes wide with both fear and pride. Step forward, Cadet Lorak. You will face the human. Lorak froze, his breath catching in his throat, but he obeyed, his boots heavy as he walked to the center. His heart pounded in his chest. He carried no shield, only a training staff. His hands shook, though he tried to hide it. He faced the human, who looked at him with calm eyes. No hatred, no pride, only stillness. The cadets leaned forward, their whispers sharp like knives. Some hissed that Lorak was lucky the weapon was just a toy. Others muttered that he was doomed. No one could agree, but all wanted to seethe. Instructor raised his claw. Silence slammed back into the room. One strike, he ordered, nothing more. The human bent down again, his hand brushing the floor. He found another shard, smaller, lighter, sharper. He set it into the sling. His arms drew back, the laces pulled tight. The hall grew quiet, so quiet the cadets could hear their own hearts beating. Lorak swallowed hard. Sweat rolled down his scaled face. He lifted his staff high, his knees bent, bracing for the strike. He wanted to believe he was safe. He wanted to believe it was only a string, but doubt coiled around his chest like chains. The human's arms held steady. His eyes narrowed, his breath. Even calm, then with emotion too fast to follow, he released. The shard flew like lightning. It sliced the air and struck the staff with a sharp crack. The force ripped through Lorak's arms. The staff shattered in his grip. The shard spun off, ricocheting against the wall, sparks bursting. Lorak staggered back, his hands stinging, his eyes wide with terror. The cadets gasped again. The sound filled the hall. Some shouted, some cursed, but all were shaken. The staff was solid wood, reinforced for training, and it had split like dry bone under the strike of a shoelace. Lorak dropped what was left of the staff pieces, scattered across the steel floor. His arms shook, his breath heavy. His eyes flicked toward the human, who stood silent, the sling dangling calm in his hands. The instructor stepped forward, his massive shadow falling over both cadets, his voice heavy. You see the truth again. Flesh may be spared for now, but only because the human chose restraint. The weapon is no toy, it is power. The cadets muttered fear, twisting deeper inside them if the human had aimed. At Lorak's chest or head, the fight would already be over. No armor, no shield, no staff would have saved him. The human said nothing, but his silence was louder than any shout. He picked up another shard, twisted. The string pulled it back slowly, but did not release. He only showed them the weapon still worked. Ready, always ready. The cadet stared wide-eyed, imagining the strike that never came. The instructor growled, "Never mistake mercy for weakness." The cadets shivered under his voice. They looked again at the human, and no longer saw something small, no longer saw something weak. They saw danger hidden inside, calm eyes and simple hands. Lorak stumbled back into the ranks, shame burning his face. His fellow cadets avoided his gaze. None of them wanted to face the human next. The instructor turned away, his voice deep. "The lesson grows each moment, and the galaxy will learn it as you have. Humans with nothing become humans with everything." The cadets whispered again, but now their voices carried fear, not mockery. The human still stood calm, shoelace sling wrapped around his hand, and the weight of that silence pressed against every alien heart. The challenge was far from over, and each of them knew the next test would cut even deeper. The hall felt like a storm trapped in silence. The cadets stood rigid, their scales cold with sweat, their eyes fixed on the human who still held the shoelace sling loose in his hand. It looked so simple, so harmless, yet the dents in steel, the broken staff, the bruised pride of their strongest warriors all screamed. Otherwise, no one dared to laugh anymore, no one dared to mock. Every whisper was heavy with fear. The instructor's tail scraped against the floor as he turned slowly, his massive body casting long shadows across the cadets. His eyes burned yellow sharp and unblinking. He growled deep enough to shake the walls. "The weapon has struck steel, the weapon has struck shield, and it has shattered staff. Now we test it where fear is born." The cadets shifted uneasily, claws tapping against armor. Some hissed under their breath, but none spoke aloud. They already knew what the instructor meant. Flesh had been spared before, but this time there would be no easy escape. This time the test would draw. "Real paint," the instructor pointed his claw toward the rows. Another cadet stepped forward, not by choice, but by command. His name was Drael, a towering brute with heavy armor scarred from countless battles. His muscles rippled beneath scaled skin. His smirk sharp and cruel, unlike Lorak or Zarak. He felt no fear, or at least he pretended not to. He stomped into the center, his voice echoing across the hall. "I will not fall to string and scrap." He raised his heavy shield, thick steel reinforced with alloy. His claws tightened around his weapon, a long mace used to crush stone. "I will end this foolish game." The cadets roared through their voices cracked. Some cheered for Draal, desperate to see human pride broken. Others whispered, uncertain already, doubting already, fearing. The human stood calm, his sling dangling, his eyes watching every movement of Draal. He did not speak. His silence was sharper than any blade. The instructor stepped aside, his voice cold. "Prove it, Draal," slammed his shield with his mace. The sound thundered through the hall. He spread his stance, firm wide. He sneered, "Come, human, strike if you dare. Your toy will break against me." The human bent slowly, his fingers brushing the ground. He found another shard, jagged, heavy-stained. With old rust he placed it in the sling, his arms pulled back, the string-tight muscles locked every motion. Sharp, precise, Drael raised his shield, smirking wide, his voice booming, "Do it." The human released. The shard cracked through the air. The sound split the silence. It slammed against Draal's shield. Sparks flew. A deep echo rang out, but the shard did not pierce. Instead, it ricocheted, spinning at a sharp angle faster than eyes could follow. It curved through the air and struck Draal's exposed arm just above the wrista. Cry tore from Draal's throat. His mace fell clattering against the steel floor. He staggered back, clutching his arm, pain written across his face. The shield slipped, nearly dropping. The cadets gasped, voices rising sharp. and broken. The hall erupted, some shouting impossible, some hissing in shock, some backing away, as if the human might turn the sling on them next. Draal cursed. His pride shattered, his arm trembling. The shard had cut through the gap in his armor, hitting where he thought himself safe. The human lowered his sling, his face calm as ever, his eyes locked on Draal, no gloating, no words, only silence, the silence that made every cadet's chest tighten with unease. The instructor stepped forward, his claws echoing sharp against the floor. He growled deep enough to rattle the air with nothing but string. He has broken shield with nothing but scrap. He has disarmed warrior with nothing but silence. He has spread fear. The cadets fell quiet, their eyes wide, their bodies tense. None could deny what they had seen. Shoelaces should not defeat steel. Shoelaces should not cut warriors. Yet it had happened before their eyes. Draal staggered back into the rows, shame twisting his face, his pride as broken as his weapon. The cadets avoided his gaze. None wanted to share in his humiliation. The instructor raised his claw once more, his voice heavy as stone. Remember this moment. Remember this fear. Humans with nothing are never powerless, and if you ever face them, in war you will not laugh. You will run. The cadets shivered under his words, their claws scraping against the floor, their whispers hushed. Some looked at the human, not with hatred, but with caution, as if staring at a predator wrapped in human skin. The human stood still, shoelace sling in his hand, the dents, the broken staff, the fallen warriors all behind him. He did not smile, he did not speak, he only weighted, his presence heavier than the walls themselves. And in that silence the cadets knew the next test would not just measure weapons, it would measure something deeper, something far more dangerous. Imagination turned to strategy, and strategy turned to survival. The training hall lay in silence, but the silence did not stay within its walls. Whispers had already escaped, carried on every tongue like fire, moving through dry grass. By the time the cadets left the room, the story had grown larger than the dent in the wall, larger than the broken staff, larger even than Draal's cry of pain. The tale of the human who turned shoelaces into a weapon spread through corridors, barracks, mess halls, and command decks. The cadets, who had laughed earlier, no longer laughed. Their voices were hushed when they spoke. Their eyes always darted toward the shadows, as if the human might appear again at any moment. Some tried to dismiss it. They claimed it was trickery or luck, but their trembling tones betrayed them. Others spoke with awe, almost reverence, but every retelling carried the same thread. Humans could take nothing and turn it into danger. The instructor remained in his chamber, seated on the raised platform, his massive claws resting against his knees, his yellow eyes fixed on the floor. But his mind raced. He had seen many species. He had trained soldiers from 100 worlds' claws. Fang's plasma rifles, warships towering like mountains, yet none of those shook him like the sight of a human weaving string into death. He had demanded a lesson to humiliate the outsider. Instead, he had found himself teaching something very different. The cadets thought they had watched the human prove a weapon, but the truth was deeper. They had seen imagination turned into fear, and fear was the strongest weapon of all. News reached the higher ranks faster than the cadets could walk admirals. Generals and instructors from other divisions called for reports. They demanded confirmation. They asked again and again the same question. Could it be true? Had a human really made a weapon from shoelaces? The answers were the same each time. Yes, the admirals argued. Some laughed at the idea, dismissing it as rumor. Others grew silent, their eyes narrowing as they imagined humans armed with more than string if shoelaces could wound warriors. What could they do with real weapons, real ships, real? Or their silence spread into meetings, into councils, until even the high command felt the chill in the barracks. The cadets sat together, their usual boasts gone. One whispered, "I saw the wall dent myself." Another muttered, "I heard the shield crack." A third spoke softer, his claws trembling. If he aimed for the head, Draal would be dead. The others fell silent. No one denied it. The truth was too heavy. The human, meanwhile, sat alone in his assigned quarters, his sling resting on the table beside him, the shoelaces tied neat and strong. He did not smile, he did not speak. He only sat calm as if he knew the walls themselves carried his story, the whispers of fear spreading further than he ever could walk. The instructor entered without warning, his massive frame filling the doorway. He stared at the human for a long moment, his voice deep but quieter than before. Today, you changed this hall. You changed how they see you, how they see your kind. The human met his eyes. Calm, unshaken, he said. Nothing but his silence carried meaning stronger than any word. The instructor growled softly, almost to himself. Never underestimate a human with nothing. He turned and left his heavy steps echoing down the corridor. By the next day, the story had reached. Other academy's soldiers spoke of it in hushed tones. Trainers warned their cadets about it. Commanders debated its meaning. Some dismissed it still, but most felt unease. The idea rooted deep in their minds. Humans were not like other species. Humans were not safe to measure by appearance alone. Soon, even outside the academy, the whispers grew: merchants in markets, workers in shipyards, officers in command halls. The phrase passed from mouth to mouth. Never underestimate a human. The galaxy had always seen humans as fragile, soft skin, weak claws, blunt teeth. Now that image cracked, replaced by something far more unsettling. Not strength, not technology, but imagination. The kind of imagination that turned shoestrings into fear. The human did not chase fame. He did not shout his victory. He simply existed, and his silence spread louder than thunder. Every cadet who had been there carried the memory like a scar, and every alien who heard the story felt the same chill. If shoelaces could become weapons, what else could humans make? What else could they do when cornered, when desperate, when forced to survive? The story would not die. It would only grow, and in every whisper, in every corner, one warning remained clear. Never underestimate a human, for even with nothing, they will always find a way. The training hall was massive, a cavern of steel and light where alien cadets stood in neat rows, their scaled armor gleaming under the white glow of hovering lamps. At the center of the hall stood a human, alone and unarmed. He looked small compared to the towering aliens, his plain uniform, plain shoes and simple face giving no hint of danger. The air was tense. The cadets whispered, their voices sharp and mocking, as they stared at the fragile figure in their midst. The instructor, a towering reptilian, with horns curling back over his head, slammed his claw against the steel floor. The sound echoed like thunder. Silence fell across the room. His eyes locked on the human, sharp yellow slits that could cut through steel. Demonstrate a weapon, the instructor demanded, his voice cold like the edge of a blade. The human froze for a heartbeat. He had no sword, no plasma gun, no claws or fangs like the others. Only his body and the shoelaces tied neatly around his boots. The aliens began to laugh, a low rumble that filled the hall. One cadet sneered, "Look at him. He has nothing," another hissed. "Humans are weak. They depend on tools and machines. Without them, they are nothing." But the instructor was not laughing. His gaze stayed fixed on the human who met it. Calmly, no panic, no fear in his eyes. "Time is running." The instructor growled, "Show me what your kind can do, or admit defeat." The human crouched slowly, his hands reaching to untie his shoelaces. The aliens broke into louder laughter. Some doubled over, mocking him. "What will he do? Strangle us with a string?" Another shouted. The human ignored them. His fingers worked quickly, pulling the laces free, his movements sharp and precise. There was no hesitation. He did not even glance at the jeering crowd. He was focused, as if the noise around him did not exist. He held the two laces in his hands, stretching them, testing the tension. The cadets muttered confused whispers, replacing their laughter. "What is he doing? He is wasting time. Why does he not surrender?" But The instructor said nothing. He folded his arms, his tail coiling slowly behind him, his eyes narrow with curiosity. He had seen humans before, but always with their machines, always with weapons built by factories. This was different. The human's hands. Move faster now. Tying knots, bending the laces, twisting them around a small scrap of metal he found near the floor, perhaps a broken piece of training gear, perhaps something left behind, but now it was part of his plan. Minutes past the laughter began to die, replaced by uneasy silence. The cadets leaned forward, watching every motion of the human's hands. The string pulled tighter, the frame bent into shape. Something crude but recognizable began to form, a slingshot. The human held it up for all to see, a simple weapon born from nothing but string and scrap. The cadets burst into laughter again, louder than before. "Is that all a child's toy?" One shouted, "It cannot even bruise skin." The instructor raised his claw for silence. He stepped, and closer, his shadow falling over the human. "Prove it." His voice rumbled deep. The human nodded calm. As ever, he scanned the floor, picked up a shard of broken metal, small, heavy enough for what he needed. He placed it carefully in the pouch of his shoelace. Sling pulled back his arms, muscles-tight eyes fixed on the far wall. For a moment the hall was silent, every cadet waiting, every breath held the human released. The shard flew with a sharp crack. It slammed against the reinforced training wall sparks. Flew, and a dent, the size of a fist, appeared in the steel. The sound echoed like thunder across the hall. The laughter stopped. Every alien stared wide-eyed. Some gasped, others stepped back. The wall was built to resist training weapons, even plasma. Shots, and yet a scrap of metal hurled by string had marked it. The human lowered the slingshot, calm, his face unreadable. His eyes locked on the instructor as if to say, "Your challenge is answered." The cadets whispered among themselves, "Impossible, how? How could string do that? It must be a trick." "No trick." The instructor growled, his voice low but heavy with respect. He stepped closer, towering over the human, his eyes narrowing. The human did not flinch. The weapon still in his hand looked simple, harmless. Yet the dent in the wall proved otherwise. The hall was silent again. The alien cadets, staring no longer with mockery but with unease. They had come to watch a human fail to laugh at his weakness. Instead, they had seen something else, something they did not understand. The instructor spoke slowly, each word carrying weight with nothing but string and will. "You made a weapon." His claws tapped against the floor, his voice colder than before. "What else can your kind create when cornered?" The human said nothing. He only held the slingshot tighter. The cadets felt a chill ripple through them. If a human could turn shoelaces into a weapon, what could they do with real tools? Real machines, real war. The silence deepened. Every alien felt the same thought, though none dared speak it. Humans were dangerous not because of strength, not because of claws or guns, but because they could make something deadly out of nothing at all. The instructor finally turned away, his voice sharp enough for all to hear. "The lesson begins now. Never underestimate a human." The cadets stood stiff, unease in their eyes, fear crawling quietly into their hearts. The human stood alone, weapon of string in hand, a dent in steel behind him, and silence heavy across the hallland. The story was only beginning. The training hall still carried the echo of the dent in the steel wall the human had made. The mark glowed faintly under the white lights, a reminder of what had just happened. The alien cadets stared at it, their eyes wide, some in disbelief, some in fear, but none laughing anymore. The silence stretched heavy, almost painful. Then it broke with nervous laughter. One cadet tried to mock again, his voice cracking under the weight of his own doubt. "It is just lucky," shouted a trick. "A simple string cannot defeat real weapons." Another cadet hissed, "Yes, it is weak, a toy for children." He only dented the wall because the shard of metal was sharp, not because the string was strong, but even as they spoke, their voices trembled. The truth was plain before them. A human had taken nothing and made something deadly. The human ignored the noise, his face calm, his fingers adjusting the knots on the sling. He tested the pull again, stretching it between his hands. The string trembled under tension, yet it held strong. The cadets watched every motion, unable to look away. The instructor had not moved. His sharp eyes locked on the human. He said nothing, but the silence of his presence pressed against every cadet like a weight. His claws tapped against the steel floor. Slow, steady, measured, one cadet dared to step forward. His scaled face twisted with arrogance. His armor gleamed polished and heavy. He pointed at the human with a claw. "This proves nothing," he growled. "Let him. Face me, let us see if his string can stand against living flesh." The cadets roared at once, some with laughter, some with cheers. The hall shook with the sound. The human did not move, his calm eyes shifting only slightly toward the challenger. The instructor raised his claw. Silence slammed back into the room, and if the instructor said, his voice low but sharp as thunder, he turned his gaze to the human. "The weapon is not yet proven against resistance." The human tilted his head slowly, almost like he had expected this. His hands tightened around the sling. He said no words. He did not need to. The cadets shifted uneasily. Something about his silence felt heavier than a shout. The chosen challenger stepped forward, his steps loud against the steel floor. His scales shimmered under the light muscles moving beneath his armor. His smirk revealed sharp teeth. He carried his training shield across one arm, a curved plate of alloy stronger than stone. He faced the human towering over him by two heads. His voice loud for all to hear: "Your toy cannot harm me, not even scratch this shield. You will break your string and your pride." The cadets cheered again, but their voices carried nervous edges. They wanted to believe their kin. They wanted to believe the human was still weak, but deep inside a whisper of doubt crawled. The instructor spoke once more. "The rules are simple," he said. "One strike, prove the weapon is real, or prove it is worthless." The human nodded slowly. He bent down again, searching the ground. His fingers found another shard of scrap, smaller than the first, but heavier, jagged on one side. Perfect for what he needed. He placed it carefully in the sling his hands, pulled the string back arms, steady eyes narrowing on the alien warrior before him. The cadets held their breath. The challenger raised his shield, smiling wide and cruel. "You cannot harm me, human." The silence was unbearable. Every alien felt their hearts pound faster. The human released. The shard flew with a crack, sharper, louder than before. It cut the air like lightning and smashed against the shield. The sound rang across the hall, metal on metal, sparks bursting. The challenger staggered back one step, his smirk faltering. The cadets gasped. But then came the true shock. Shard ricocheted off the shield, spinning at an angle, and slammed into the alien's exposed knee joint. The warrior cried out. His shield dropped, his leg buckled under him. Pain carved across his face. The hall exploded with noise, shouts, cries, disbelief. The cadets rushed forward but stopped at the sharp wave of the instructor's claw. Silence returned, heavy, suffocating. The human lowered the sling once more, his face calm, as if nothing unusual had happened, his eyes never leaving the fallen warrior, who now struggled to rise, shame burning in his gaze. The instructor stepped forward, claws scraping against the steel floor, his eyes fixed on the human. His voice rumbled low but clear in that single moment. "You have turned string into fear."